Welcome to the France 24 debate. Not a day goes by, it seems, without news of more violence committed by Boko Haram and increasingly beyond the borders of Nigeria. Overnight, Niger was once again attacked. 3 people were killed in an attack on the village in the region of Difa. Chad has also been added to the list of countries regularly targeted, joining not only Nigeria, but of course Cameroon, which had borne a fair amount of the brunt of the violence in the last few weeks. In fact, no village anywhere near Nigeria's northern border can now consider itself safe, it seems. What happened earlier this month in Fotokol in Cameroon is becoming sadly typical. An attack by Chadian troops on Boko Haram inside Nigeria prompted the militants to take on civilians in neighboring Fotokol, a town that has now become something of a ghost town.
It's hard to believe, but this dusty town, occupied by soldiers, was once one of Cameroon's top holiday destinations. But now the streets lie empty, and burnt-out cars and bullet casings have littered the area. Fotokol has become the focus of an international military drive to combat Boko Haram insurgents operating in the region. Its position on the Nigeria border has made it a key target for the militants in their bid to seize more territory.
Fotokol is a sensitive point because it links the 2 big regions, West Africa and Central Africa. And this village is the transit point everybody needs to go through for all economic and personal activities.
Cameroon has reinforced its troops in Fotokol, setting up a base, digging trenches and positioning heavy artillery at the town's entrance. Residents have been forced to flee to neighbouring towns, in some cases across borders into Niger and Chad. Maintaining a high vigilance for extremist activity has become the norm.
As soon as we see something suspicious, we inform the village chief, and the chief informs the army. We're not worried anymore, particularly those of us who have moved to Kolofata now.
The United States has pledged support for Cameroon's army in the fight against Boko Haram as a joint military offensive with Niger and Chad was launched, a step towards bringing peace back to the Lake Chad region.
Well, to discuss the widening of the Boko Haram insurgency and the effects that's likely to have on Nigeria's stability with its forthcoming elections planned for March, I've been joined here in the studio by a number of guests who are here to discuss that with me tonight. Yomi Uni, who's a Nigerian freelance journalist. Thank you for being with us tonight as well. Sheikh Ibn Omar, former Chadian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Ebenezer Okpokpo, a lawyer and member also of the France-Nigeria Association, has joined us. Slightly late, but we're delighted that you made it. Thank you, making your way through the Paris traffic. Also, Emmanuel Iga, who's director of Phobos International Consulting Company that specializes in geopolitics and economy in Africa. Also joining us tonight is our correspondent in Lagos, Anna Cunningham. Anna, first of all, to you, this has been a story that you've been following, of course, for a long time. The insurgency began in Nigeria back in 2009. The fact is that it has spread beyond those borders remarkably quickly and, from the point of view of the militants, remarkably effectively over the course of the last few weeks.
It has. I mean, Nigeria has been fighting this for 6 years, but we've seen an increase in the number of attacks recently, both in Nigeria and also across the border regions, Niger, Chad and Cameroon. And I think the tactics of Boko Haram have certainly changed over the past year. I mean, what we were seeing last year was Boko Haram going into villages and towns and carrying out attacks, shooting and killing at random, and then retreating from those towns. But then about last summer, what we started to see, or rather hear, because it's obviously very difficult to get to these regions, we started to hear reports that Boko Haram had taken over a number of towns, certainly in Borno State up in the northeast. And now it seems that along the border regions, they've reverted to these attacks they were doing previously, going in, carrying out attacks, and then withdrawing again. I think that the whole problem with this story is it is incredibly difficult to report because journalists have been unable to get to the northeastern regions of Nigeria and these border areas simply because it is too dangerous, and we haven't been able to rely on the Nigerian military to protect us if we go in there. So it's very difficult to assess what has been going on, because we either rely on what we're hearing from the military, or we rely on what we hear from eyewitnesses after these attacks have taken place.
Yomi Oni, it is precisely what's happened in Syria and Iraq. A caliphate is created. It is too dangerous and too far away from the capitals of the countries to be accessible to the journalists. And so these sort of dark noises about things happening in far-flung corners filter through, but very little in the way of actual fact.
Well, like in most dangerous situations all over the world, the first concern should be about the safety of the people. Now we're having a case whereby we have an insurgency really going on, and let us not forget something, as I keep saying. We are not fighting a conventional war. We are not fighting a conventional army. These people come in, they make their attacks, and they easily dissolve into the local population. So it's really difficult to know who is who, and it's really difficult to know how they intend to attack or when they intend to attack. Granted that, okay, the Nigerian military has really lagged behind due to the lack of political will. I keep saying that the military is not the problem. The problem is with the politicians and the political class. Now it's really difficult for the Nigerian army that is striving to recover territories at the same time to protect journalists.
Of course. And on that point, I'd like to put that to you, Ashek Ibn Omar. The problem that was faced by Nigeria logistically is the one being faced now by Chad, which is come under attack in the last 10 days or so for the first time by Boko Haram militants along the shores of Lake Chad. The problem is that these regions are so remote and so far from the capitals of the countries involved that getting the military there, policing them, keeping an eye on what's going on is proving logistically, even if we leave aside the question of political will for a moment, incredibly difficult for the military forces involved.
Thank you for your invitation. One might say that seen from the capital of Cameroon or from Abuja, the northern part of the two countries is a far-flung part of the country and some kind of marginal zone, even in terms of economical interest. But seen from Chad, it is the opposite. Fotokol and Gambarou are 70 kilometers from the capital in N'Djamena. The last attack on the Lake Chad region is about less than 100 kilometers. So the radius of the operation in northern Nigeria and northern Cameroon is less than 100 kilometers from the capital in N'Djamena. You may add to that the fact that Chad is a landlocked country, and the road, the commercial road through Cameroon and Nigeria had been cut off by this insurgency, and we have been paying a heavy economic price for a certain time. So that is the contradiction here. Chad must have mobilized his forces some time ago, because we are bearing the burden in terms of direct threat to the capital, in terms of economic difficulties. But curiously, our government have been very slow in taking action, even if we agree that it is a necessary action. It's been very slow. And the most important thing is that the problem of intelligence. There has been some element of information that Boko Haram get at least part of its weaponry through black marketing in Chad and CAR and Sudan even. And Chad has done nothing to stop this. And we have a real coordination problem in the region in terms of intelligence gathering and above all in terms of intelligence sharing. So I think that we must work on these points.
We're going to talk about that coordination effort. In fact, what happened in N'Djamena next week, it is where they will meet to discuss the functioning of this regional force that is up to be up and running and to launch this offensive in March. And I'll raise that in just a moment. First of all, though, I wanted to ask you, in particular, Ebenezer Okpokpo, on the question of the way the Nigerian military, before we move on to the regional force, on the way that it has handle this. It is, of course, dealing... one is reminded of the problem that was facing the Malian military at the time of the coup d'etat. They are facing an insurgency that is by definition very difficult to take on, that is well armed, that is in control of a part of the territory, as were the Malian, the Tuareg rebels in Mali. It is a demotivated force that is therefore facing Boko Haram militants. It's dangerous. The Nigerian military are badly organized, and its soldiers are simply not able to tackle the threat.
Well, you know, since the Boko Haram crisis started, the Nigerian military has been accused of a lot of things, and I fight against it because it is a refusal of recognition of the difficulties the Nigerian military is facing. We are not in a situation where you go, you want to act, and then there is no barrier. The situation in the northeast of Nigeria is very peculiar. You deal with the same people, the same culture, the same religion, and family ties are in between. How do they fight such a thing? You see, when you want to fight Boko Haram, like the Nigerian military is trying to do, it is extremely difficult because it is not a conventional war. These three states did not declare a war on Nigeria. We have an insurgency, a terrorist group that has declared, that is carrying out terrorist acts. You do not walk in with the military and then shoot at sight. That is the difficulty. No one seems to even recognize that aspect of it. And so each time the Nigerian military is accused of inaction or whatever, I feel it is not fair on it because you want to accuse it and say, we are not succeeding because the Nigerian military is demotivated. No, that is not the case, because they are doing all in their capacity to resolve the issue.
On that question of the difficulty of taking on Boko Haram, Emmanuel Liga, we've seen today the Cameroonian military accused by a non-governmental organization of human rights abuses. That is, once the military does make it into the region, this goes back to the point that you were making, and rounds up locals suspected of sympathy or of being involved, it can go too far. Human rights abuses can happen, violations can happen, and it's a sort of it's a no-win situation for any military taking on this kind of group.
Of course, yes. I think the Nigerian army has faced the same accusations or allegations at the beginning of this crisis, when actually they had the upper hand in counter-attacking against Boko Haram in some communities. And people were quick to say they were not actually filtering the Boko Haram guys out of the community people, and they were just like, shooting at anybody they saw. So it's very complicated. I think one thing we still have to understand is that when you take the northern territory of Nigeria, from Jos, Abuja, up to Kano, Maiduguri, we are looking at a place, at an area that is about the size of France. So you can, take France from Marseille, I don't know, to Dunkirk on the English channels, and I don't know, take it from Strasbourg to Nantes. It's something like that. It's really very vast. And when you localize it to the northeastern part of Nigeria, where the Boko Haram is most active, we are also looking at a territory that is about the size of Belgium. So it's really big. But that being said, we have had instances whereby Boko Haram took over cities, communities, and actually set the army up there. They became an occupation army in these cities for days and for weeks. So when you have the enemy troop occupying a place, you now know where they are, you know the weapons they have, but still the Nigerian army was not able to go and take them on and dislodge them. On the case of Gamboro, for example, we had to wait for the Chadians to come down to Nigeria and do that job. So that's still something the Nigerian population is not being able to understand.
One thing that the Nigerian military do seem to be doing, Anna Cunningham, slightly differently is communicating perhaps slightly better than they had in recent weeks. We've heard this week about the most recent offensive, 300 militants, they tell us, killed since the beginning of the week.
Yeah, we used to hear nothing from the Nigerian military in terms of, the numbers of people killed. But I think they have improved in giving out numbers, but I think we still need to add some caution to that and that is largely because we have no second source as to how many of these Boko Haram militants have been killed. I mean, again, today there was a statement issued that said they had killed a large number of Boko Haram militants in the Sambisa forest, but there are no journalists there, there are no independent aid organisations there who can clarify these figures. And I think the big problem in the past has been that there has been a certain lack of credibility to what we've heard from the Nigerian military. I mean, they have previously come out and, for example, said that the Chibok girls had been released, the Chibok girls had escaped. They had to backtrack on that. There was another announcement when they said that a peace deal had been done with Boko Haram. And again, that had to be backtracked. So we do, at the moment, have to add some caution to these figures that we're hearing from the Nigerian military when they say that they have killed Boko Haram fighters in their hundreds.
We're going to take a quick break now. Anna Cunningham, thank you very much. We'll be coming back to you in the second part of tonight's debate. A quick break now, and we'll be right back with part two of tonight's debate devoted to the spreading offensive by Boko Haram and what that's likely to mean for Nigeria in particular, for its stability and for its forthcoming elections that we're going to be discussing in the second part of tonight's debate.